They sold her for 30 pieces of silver and a forgiven debt. Senya Vorn was 19 years old when her stepmother signed away her life, trading her to the Alpha King like livestock at an auction. For 3 years, she had been the ghost of Thornwood Manor, scrubbing bloodstains from stone floors, eating scraps meant for dogs, sleeping in a cellar that flooded every spring. But they didn't know what hid beneath the leather cuff she never removed. They didn't know that her mother's dying words weren't madness, they were prophecy. They didn't know that the strange mark burned into her wrist wasn't a scar. It was a seal. And seals, when pressed hard enough, break. When the cold-hearted Alpha King Kalis Thane ripped that cuff from her arm, he didn't find a servant's brand. He found the symbol of an extinct bloodline, the golden son of the Aurelians, the wolves of pure light who were slaughtered 2 centuries ago. Every wolf in his kingdom had knelt to find her. And now she was kneeling before him, covered in ash, worth more than his entire throne. The servant girl was about to become the most dangerous woman alive, and she didn't even know it yet. The cellar beneath Thornwood Manor smelled of mildew, rust, and rotting onions. Senya Vorn woke before dawn, as she always did, to the sound of water dripping through the cracked ceiling onto the thin blanket she clutched around her shoulders. She was 19. In the wolf packs, that meant she should have shifted years ago, found her place in the hierarchy, perhaps even caught the scent of a destined mate. But Senya had done none of those things. Her wolf was silent, a void where instinct should have howled. She was, by all accounts, defective. And defective wolves in Thornwood didn't get bedrooms. They got cellars. She climbed the creaking stairs, her bare feet numb against the frozen wood. The manor was already stirring. She could hear the clatter of pots in the kitchen, the sharp voice of her stepmother issuing commands. Senya moved quickly, slipping into the servants' corridor before anyone could see her. "There you are, gutter rat. Too late." Revna Vorn leaned against the doorframe of the kitchen, a half-eaten apple in her manicured hand. She was everything Senya was not: tall, curves in all the right places, hair like polished mahogany that fell in perfect waves. At 21, Revna had already shifted into a sleek brown wolf and had 3 alphas from neighboring packs vying for her attention. She took a bite of the apple, chewing slowly, her amber eyes raking over Senya's threadbare dress. "Mother wants the Great Hall spotless before noon. The alpha is visiting." Revna smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Try not to embarrass us by existing too loudly." She tossed the apple core at Senya's feet and sauntered away. Senya picked it up. There was still fruit clinging to the core. She ate it as she walked toward the Great Hall, savoring the sweetness. Breakfast wasn't guaranteed. In this house. Not for her. The Great Hall was a disaster. Last night's feast had left wine stains on the ancient tapestries and bones scattered across the long oak table. Senya gathered her bucket, her brush, and the lye soap that had long since cracked the skin of her hands into a permanent map of red fissures. She scrubbed. She always scrubbed. As she worked, her sleeve rode up, exposing the leather cuff wrapped tight around her left wrist. It was old, the hide worn soft as butter, and she never removed it. Not to bathe, not to sleep, not ever. Her mother had given it to her on the night she died. "Never let them see the mark, little son. Promise me. They'll kill you if they know." Senya had been 6 years old, holding her mother's hand as the life bled out of her onto the forest floor. She hadn't understood then. She barely understood now. But she had kept the promise for 13 years, and she would keep it until she died. The mark beneath the cuff sometimes burned, a low, pulsing heat that flared when she was angry or afraid. She had learned to ignore it, the way she had learned to ignore hunger, and cold, and the casual cruelty of a family that had never wanted her. Her father had remarried 2 years after her mother's death. Helda had seemed kind at first, bringing Senya sweets and braiding her hair. But then her father died. A hunting accident, they said, though his body was never found. And the mask had crumbled. Senya became the help, then the servant, then the ghost. She was almost finished with the table when the front doors crashed open. Aldrich Vane, the Alpha of Thornwood, strode in with his beta close behind. He was a thick-necked man with a perpetual sneer and eyes that lingered too long on the female servants. "Helda!" he bellowed. Senya's stepmother appeared instantly, her face arranged in simpering delight. "Alpha Vane, what an honor! We weren't expecting you until—" "Shut up!" Aldrich cut her off. His eyes swept the room and landed on Senya, still kneeling by the table with her brush. A slow smile spread across his face. "I have news. A buyer for the girl." Senya's blood turned to ice. Helda's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation, then something that looked almost like relief. "A buyer?" Helda repeated. "For her? The Shadowborn King needs servants for his citadel. Strong ones. Apparently, they keep dying." Aldrich laughed at his own joke. "He's paying well. Enough to clear your debts to me." "With interest." Senya couldn't breathe. The brush fell from her numb fingers. Helda turned to look at her stepdaughter, and for the first time in years she smiled. "Sold," Helda said. "When do they collect her?" The word echoed in Senya's skull like a death knell. Sold. 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 She scrambled to her feet, the bucket of gray water sloshing over the floor she had just cleaned. "You can't. I'm not property. I'm pack. The old laws say—" "The old laws." Aldrich Vane stepped closer, and Senya instinctively backed against the table. "The old laws say a wolf without a shift is no wolf at all. You're a burden, girl, an embarrassment. Be grateful I found someone willing to take you." "The Shadowborn King." Senya's voice trembled despite her efforts to steady it. She had heard the stories. Every wolf had. "His servants don't just die. He works them to death. He pays." Helda interrupted smoothly. "And that's all that matters." Revna had appeared in the doorway, watching the scene with barely concealed glee. "Maybe he'll finally put you to good use, little rat. I hear he has a temper. Maybe he'll rip your throat out on the first day and save everyone the trouble." Senya's wrist burned beneath the leather cuff, a sharp, insistent heat that made her grit her teeth. "Not now. Control it. Please." The word tasted like ash in her mouth, but she forced it out. She looked at Helda, searching for any trace of the woman who had once braided her hair. "Mother, stepmother, I've served faithfully. I've never complained. I'll work harder. You'll do nothing." Helda's voice was flat. "The deal is done. The king's men arrive at dusk." She turned to Alpha Vane with a gracious nod. "We'll have her cleaned and ready." Cleaned. Like a pig for market. The next hours passed in a blur of humiliation. Senya was dragged to the servants' washroom, stripped and scrubbed by rough hands that didn't care about the bruises they left. They tried to remove her leather cuff. "No." Senya yanked her arm back with a ferocity that surprised even her. "It stays." The servant woman narrowed her eyes. "The king's household won't want you wearing rags." "It stays." Senya's voice dropped low, and for a moment something flickered in her eyes. A flash of gold that made the servant woman step back. "Touch it again, and I'll bite your fingers off." The cuff stayed. They dressed her in a rough-spun gray dress, the uniform of a sold servant, and bound her wrists with rope. Not tight enough to injure, but tight enough to remind her of her place. She was led to the front courtyard as the sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of blood and amber. A black carriage waited. It was unlike anything Senya had seen, wrought iron twisted into shapes that seemed to writhe in the fading light, pulled by 4 horses with coats so dark they absorbed the sunset. The crest on the door made her stomach clench. A snarling wolf's head surrounded by shadow, the sigil of the Thane bloodline. The Shadowborn King. His name was Kalis Thane, and the stories about him were the kind mothers whispered to frighten disobedient pups. They said he had killed his own brother to claim the throne. They said his wolf was not gray or black or brown, but pure shadow, a beast that could melt into darkness and reappear behind you with its teeth at your throat. They said he hadn't smiled in a decade, not since the curse took hold. The curse. That was the other story. The Thane bloodline was dying, every generation weaker, lives shorter, unable to find true mates. The king was 28 years old, and the whispers said he would be lucky to see 40. A man in black livery stepped down from the carriage. His face was impassive as he surveyed her. "This is the one?" "Senya Vorn," Alpha Vane confirmed. "Strong enough to work, meek enough not to cause trouble. She's wolfless. No risk of her challenging anyone." The man in black circled her slowly, inspecting her the way one might inspect a horse for lameness. Senya kept her eyes down, her jaw tight, her wrist throbbing with hidden heat. "She'll do." He gestured to the carriage. "Get in." Senya looked back at the manor one final time. Helda stood on the steps with Revna at her side, neither of them bothering to wave. Revna waggled her fingers in a mocking farewell. "Remember their faces?" Something whispered in Senya's mind. It didn't feel like her own voice. It felt older, fiercer. "Remember. And one day, return." She climbed into the carriage. The door slammed shut, and the horses lurched forward. Through the small barred window, Senya watched Thornwood Manor shrink and disappear. Her old life, miserable as it was, vanished behind the tree line. Ahead lay the northern road, Ironspire Citadel, and the king whose shadow swallowed servants whole. Her wrist burned brighter. The journey took 3 days. Senya slept in the cramped carriage, ate stale bread passed through the window by silent guards, and watched the landscape transform from the gentle hills of Thornwood to jagged mountain peaks that clawed at a perpetually gray sky. On the third morning, she saw it. Ironspire Citadel rose from the mountains like a black fang piercing the clouds. Its walls were carved from volcanic stone, dark and glittering with embedded obsidian. Towers spiraled upward at impossible angles, connected by bridges that looked too thin to hold weight. The entire structure seemed less built than grown, as if the mountain itself had decided to become a fortress. Senya's heart hammered against her ribs. The carriage passed through 3 sets of gates, each one heavier than the last, each guarded by wolves in black armor who didn't spare her a glance. She was cargo. Less than cargo. She was a line item on a ledger, a body to fill a role until it broke. The final gate opened into a vast courtyard filled with activity. Servants hauled supplies, soldiers drilled in formation, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled in what might have been training or punishment. "Out!" The carriage door swung open. Senya stepped down on shaking legs. The cold hit her immediately. A bitter, biting wind that cut through her thin dress like a blade. She wrapped her arms around herself, painfully aware of every eye that flicked toward her, and away, uninterested. A woman approached. She was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face that looked like it had never entertained the concept of mercy. A ring of keys jangled at her waist. "Name: Senya Vorn. You'll address me as Mistress Varga. You'll speak when spoken to, work when commanded, and sleep when permitted." The woman's eyes traveled down Senya's frame with clinical detachment. "You're thin. Can you lift?" "Yes, mistress." "We'll see." Mistress Varga jerked her head toward a side door. "Processing first. Move." Processing meant standing in a line with 11 other sold servants. All of them women, all of them young, all of them wearing the same hollow expression of resigned terror. They were inspected, measured, questioned about their skills. When they asked Senya what she could do, she listed the only things she knew: cleaning, cooking, mending, and scrubbing. Another floor scrubber. The intake officer sighed. "Chamber duty. She can start with the East Wing." Senya was issued a second gray dress, a pair of worn leather shoes that didn't quite fit, and a thin blanket that smelled of the previous owner. She was assigned to a dormitory with 7 other servants, a narrow room lined with cots, barely warmer than the courtyard outside. The work began immediately. East Wing chamber duty meant emptying waste pots, changing linens, and scrubbing floors that seemed to attract grime the moment they dried. Senya worked in silence, keeping her head down, learning the rhythms of the citadel through observation. She learned that the king rarely left his private tower. She learned that servants who made mistakes were whipped in the lower courtyard. She learned that 3 servants had died in the last month alone, 2 from fever, 1 from a fall that might not have been an accident. On her 4th day, everything changed. Senya was carrying a bucket of wash water down a narrow servants' corridor when a door burst open ahead of her. A man stumbled out. One of the guards, drunk despite the early hour, his face flushed with ale. He saw her and grinned. New meat. He blocked her path, swaying slightly. Pretty, for a floor scrubber. Senya stepped to the side. Excuse me, sir. He stepped with her, still grinning. What's the rush? The floors will still be dirty in an hour. He reached for her arm, her left arm, where the cuff wrapped her wrist. Senya jerked back, but she was too slow. His fingers closed around the leather and he yanked. The cuff didn't come off. The knot held. But his force tore the sleeve of her dress, ripping the fabric from wrist to elbow. The birthmark flared into view. It was the size of a coin, burned into the inner face of her wrist as if branded there by a god's finger. A sun, golden even against her pale skin, with 7 rays extending outward like reaching flames. And it was glowing. Faintly, pulsing with an inner light that had nothing to do with the torch sconces on the wall. The guard's eyes went wide. His grip slackened. Senya didn't think. She moved, faster than she'd ever moved, shoving past him, and bolting down the corridor. She heard him shouting behind her, but she didn't stop. She ran until she found a storage closet, ducked inside, and pressed her back against the door, her chest heaving. Stupid. 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 She looked down at her wrist. The glow was fading, but the mark remained, golden and damning against her skin. She yanked what remained of her sleeve down over it and tied the torn fabric in a makeshift knot. It wouldn't hold. Not for long. She stayed in that closet for an hour, waiting for her heartbeat to slow, waiting for guards to come drag her to the whipping post. Or worse. But no one came. Maybe the guard had been too drunk to remember. Maybe he hadn't seen clearly. Maybe. Senya crept out and returned to her duties, scrubbing with renewed intensity, keeping her torn sleeve pressed tight against her body. The rest of the day passed without incident. She allowed herself to breathe. That night, as she lay on her cot staring at the ceiling, the dormitory door opened. Mistress Varga stood in the doorway, her face unreadable. Senya Vorn. Her voice cut through the darkness. Come with me. Senya's blood ran cold. Where? She whispered. The king's private chambers. Mistress Varga's keys jangled as she turned. He's requested a new servant for the night. You'll clean his study. A pause. Alone. The other servants in the dormitory were silent, but Senya could feel their stares, a mix of pity and relief. Better her than them? She rose on trembling legs and followed Mistress Varga into the darkness. The torches in the corridor seemed dimmer than before. The king's tower was separated from the rest of the citadel by a bridge of black iron that swayed slightly in the mountain wind. Senya crossed it behind Mistress Varga, her eyes fixed on the door ahead, refusing to look down at the dizzying drop below. 2 guards flanked the entrance. They didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge the women as Mistress Varga produced a key and unlocked the heavy oak door. Inside, clean the study, touch nothing else. Mistress Varga's voice was clipped. He may or may not be present. Either way, you do not speak unless spoken to. You do not look him in the eye. You do not exist unless he wishes you to. Understood? Senya nodded, her throat too tight for words. The door closed behind her. She stood in a circular antechamber lit by a single chandelier of black iron and pale candles. 3 doors led off from this room. One to her left, one to her right, one straight ahead. A small table held cleaning supplies, rags, polish, a bucket of water. The study. She had to find the study. She chose the door on her left. It opened into a library. Walls lined floor to ceiling with books so old their spines had crumbled to dust. The smell hit her immediately. Aged paper, leather, and something else. Something wild, like a storm about to break. She wasn't alone. "You're not the usual one." The voice came from the shadows near the window, deep, cold, and utterly devoid of warmth. Senya's heart stopped. A figure unfolded from a high-backed chair she hadn't noticed. He stepped into the candlelight, and Senya forgot how to breathe. Kalis Thane was not what the stories described. He was tall, over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of a predator's strength barely contained. His hair was black as a raven's wing, swept back from a face that seemed carved from the same volcanic stone as his citadel. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes. His eyes were the color of molten silver, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like prey. "The usual girl took ill," Senya managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mistress Vargas sent me in her place." "Did she?" It wasn't a question. He moved closer. Each step was silent despite his size, a predator's grace that sent alarm bells screaming through Senya's body. She kept her eyes down, fixed on his boots. Black leather, polished to a mirror shine. "You're new." He circled her slowly. "Thornwood stalk. I can smell the pine and desperation on you." Senya said nothing. Her wrist was burning beneath the torn sleeve, a pulsing heat that climbed up her arm like liquid fire. "Not now, please. Not now. Look at me." The command hit her like a physical force. Her chin lifted before she could stop it, her violet eyes meeting his silver ones. Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Recognition? It vanished too quickly to name. "Interesting," he murmured. "You have old eyes for someone so young." He reached out, and his fingers closed around her left wrist. Senya gasped. The touch sent a jolt through her entire body, and her birthmark blazed. Golden light erupted from beneath the torn fabric, so bright it cast dancing shadows across the walls. Kalis released her as if burned. He stared at her wrist, at the light bleeding through the cloth, and his silver eyes went wide. "Show me." His voice had changed, no longer cold, but urgent, demanding. "Show me the mark. Now." Senya's hands trembled as she pulled back the ruined sleeve. The birthmark was no longer faintly glowing, it was radiant. A golden sun blazing against her skin, the 7 rays pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. And it was growing. The light spread up her arm, tracing patterns beneath her skin like rivers of molten gold. Pain lanced through her. Not the dull ache she was used to, but a searing, transformative agony that drove her to her knees. "What's happening to me?" she cried out. Kalis dropped to one knee before her, his face inches from hers. His expression was unreadable, but his voice held something she hadn't expected. Reverence. "You're waking up," he said. "After 200 years, the sun is finally rising." The light consumed her. Senya screamed as fire raced through her veins, not destroying, but remaking. Every cell in her body felt like it was being rewritten by a hand older than time. Her bones sang, her blood burned. The wolf that had been silent for 19 years suddenly roared to life inside her skull. Finally, the voice was hers and not hers. It was ancient, feminine, and furious. "They caged us. They poisoned us. They made us forget. But we are awake now, little son, and we will never kneel again." Senya's back arched. A sound tore from her throat. Half howl, half something else entirely. The windows of the study exploded outward, glass cascading into the night. The candles flared and died. The books on the shelves trembled. And then the light erupted outward. A shockwave of golden energy blasted through the tower. It punched through walls, rippled across the bridge, and washed over the citadel like a sunrise compressed into a single instant. Every wolf in Ironspire felt it, a pulse of power so pure, so old, that it dropped them to their knees. In the barracks, hardened soldiers fell prostrate, whimpering. In the servants' quarters, women clutched their chests and wept without knowing why. In the council chamber, 3 visiting alphas collapsed mid-sentence, their wolves screaming "submit" inside their minds. And in the king's study, Kalis Thane, the Shadowborn King, the most feared alpha on the continent, knelt before a servant girl as golden light poured from her skin. When it finally faded, Senya was changed. She stood in the center of the destroyed study, her gray servant's dress burned away, replaced by nothing. She was naked, but her skin itself seemed to glow with a faint luminescence, as if the sun had taken up residence beneath her flesh. Her hair, once pale blonde and dull, now shimmered like spun gold. Her eyes, when she opened them, were no longer violet. They were pure, molten amber. Impossible, Kalis breathed. He was still on his knees, staring up at her. The Aurelians were extinct. Varek the Destroyer slaughtered them all. Every man, woman, and child. The histories say. The histories were wrong. Senya's voice resonated with harmonic undertones, as if 1,000 voices spoke with her. She looked down at her wrist. The birthmark was still there, but it had transformed. The golden sun now seemed three-dimensional, raised slightly from her skin, warm to the touch. One survived. Hidden. Sealed. Forgotten. She looked at Kalis. Really looked at him for the first time without fear. He was powerful. She could feel it now. The shadow that coiled inside him, the curse that was slowly killing his bloodline. But he was also beautiful. Not cold, she realized. Controlled. There was a difference. You knew, she said, the moment you touched me. You knew what I was. I suspected. Kalis rose slowly, his movements careful, as if approaching a wild animal. There have been rumors for years, whispers of a surviving Aurelian hidden somewhere in the Eastern Territories. I've had scouts searching for a decade. A muscle twitched in his jaw. I never dreamed you'd be delivered. To my door as a servant. The door to the study burst open. Guards poured in, swords drawn, followed by Mistress Varga and what appeared to be half the Citadel's command staff. They stopped dead at the sight before them. Their king, on his feet, but visibly shaken. A naked woman glowing like a small sun. And the unmistakable scent of power so ancient it made their wolves want to curl up and bare their throats. My king! The captain of the guard stepped forward, blade raised toward Senya. Step away from her. She is the last daughter of the Aurelian bloodline. Kalis's voice cracked like thunder. And if any of you so much as looks at her wrong, I will personally rip out your spine. The captain lowered his sword immediately. Kalis shrugged off his black coat and draped it around Senya's shoulders, covering her nakedness. The fabric was warm, carrying his scent. Shadow and winter and something unexpectedly soft, like cedar smoke. Clear the room, Kalis ordered. Double the guard on the bridge. No one enters this tower without my explicit command. He looked at Mistress Varga, who had gone pale as bone. We will discuss security protocols later. For now, leave us. The room emptied in seconds. Senya pulled the coat tighter around herself, suddenly exhausted. The power that had filled her was ebbing, leaving her hollow and shaky. I don't understand, she whispered. What am I? What does this mean? Kalis studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. It means everything you thought you knew was a lie. And it means you're in more danger than you've ever been in your life. His silver eyes held hers. Come, we have much to discuss, and you need rest before the vultures start circling. Senya looked at his hand. The hand of the king she had been told was a monster. She took it. Senya woke in a bed that could have fit 10 people. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the softness beneath her. No lumpy cot, no threadbare blanket, no drip of water from a cracked ceiling. The sheets were silk, cool and smooth against her skin. The pillow cradled her head like a cloud. She sat up slowly, her body aching in ways she didn't know were possible. The room around her was enormous. Vaulted ceilings painted with murals of wolves running beneath a golden sun, tall windows that looked out over snow-capped peaks, a fireplace large enough to roast an ox crackling with warmth. She was wearing a nightgown she didn't recognize, white silk, trimmed with gold thread, fit for a princess. The memories crashed back. The light, The power. The king on his knees. You slept for 14 hours. Senya's head snapped toward the voice. Kalis sat in a chair by the window, silhouetted against the morning light. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. Shadows beneath his silver eyes, his dark hair slightly disheveled. He was dressed simply now, a gray tunic and black trousers, but he still radiated authority like heat from a furnace. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I was struck by lightning and then run over by a carriage." Senya's voice was hoarse. "What happened to me?" Kalis rose and crossed to a side table where a tray of food waited. Bread, cheese, fruit, a steaming pot of tea. He poured a cup and brought it to her, his movements unhurried. "You awakened." He handed her the cup, his fingers brushing hers. A spark of warmth passed between them, and Senya felt her birthmark pulse in response. "Your power was sealed when you were a child, a desperate measure, I suspect, to hide you from those who hunted your kind. The seal held for 19 years. Last night, it broke." Senya sipped the tea, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "My mother. She gave me the cuff. She told me never to show the mark." "Your mother was wise." Kalis returned to his chair, but this time he pulled it closer to the bed. 200 years ago, the Aurelian bloodline ruled all the packs. They were the wolves of the sun, blessed by the goddess with power over light, capable of healing, of prophecy, of combat abilities that made ordinary alphas look like pups. His voice darkened. And then, Varric the Destroyer rose. "I've heard that name." Senya frowned. "In the old stories, he unified the Shadow Packs." "He did more than unify them. He waged a war of extermination. The Aurelians were too powerful to control, too righteous to corrupt. So Varric decided they had to die. All of them." Kalis leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The Burning Night. That's what the histories call it." Varric and his armies attacked during the summer solstice, when the Aurelians gathered to celebrate. They killed thousands. Men, women, children. They hunted down survivors for decades afterward. The bloodline was declared extinct. Senya's hands trembled around the teacup. "But my mother must have escaped, hidden herself among humans perhaps, or found a pack willing to shelter her. She had you, and she knew what would happen if anyone discovered what you were." Kalis's silver eyes held hers. "The seal on your power wasn't just to hide you, Senya. It was to keep you alive. An Aurelian child radiates power from birth. Your mother caged your wolf, suppressed your gifts, and turned you into something that looked ordinary." His jaw tightened. "It must have been agony for her, watching you suffer as a defective wolf, knowing she had made you that way to save your life." Tears burned in Senya's eyes. She thought of all the years of mockery, the shame of being wolfless, and the belief that she was broken. Her mother had done that on purpose, to protect her. "Who killed her?" Senya's voice was barely a whisper. "She died when I was 6, in the forest. There was so much blood." Kalis's expression hardened. "The pure dawn." "The what?" "A faction of fanatics, descendants of Varric's original followers. They believe the Aurelians were an abomination, wolves who stole too much of the goddess's power. They've spent 2 centuries ensuring the bloodline stays dead." He paused. "Someone must have discovered your mother's identity. They found her, killed her, but somehow you escaped." "My guardian." Senya remembered suddenly. A man's face, rough hands lifting her, the sound of howling in the distance. "There was a man. A warrior. He carried me away. He brought me to Thornwood." The pieces clicked into place. "That's why the old Alpha took me in. He knew. He knew what I was. And when he died, the secret died with him. His son? Aldrich Vane, he sold me to you." Senya's grief curdled into something colder. "He didn't know what I was. He just wanted to clear Helda's debts. Ironically, his greed may have saved your life." Kalis almost smiled. "The Pure Dawn has spies everywhere. If you had stayed in Thornwood much longer, they would have found you. Here, in my citadel, you have protection." Senya set down the teacup. Why do you care? Why protect me? Kalis was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. Because my bloodline is cursed. The Thanes have carried shadow in our veins for generations, a gift and a poison. Each generation grows weaker, dies younger. I am the last of my line, and I will not live to see 50. He met her eyes. The old texts speak of only one cure, the light of the Aurelians, bonded to the shadow of the Thanes. Sun and darkness in balance. Senya's breath caught. You want to use me. I want to save my people. Kalis didn't flinch from the accusation. But I won't force you into anything. You are not a prisoner here, Senya. You are not a servant. As of this moment, you are a guest of the crown, and under my protection until you decide otherwise. He stood, moving toward the door. Rest. Eat. When you're ready, we'll begin your training. Your power is awake now, but it's wild, uncontrolled. If you don't learn to master it, he paused at the threshold. The pure dawn isn't the only danger. An Aurelian who can't control her light eventually burns from the inside out. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Senya sat alone in the enormous bed, surrounded by silk and gold, the birthmark on her wrist radiating gentle warmth. She was no longer a servant. She was no longer worthless. She was the last Aurelian, hunted, powerful, and completely unprepared for what came next. But one thing was certain. She would never scrub another floor again. 3 days passed in a blur of discovery. Senya learned that she could summon light from her palms. Small orbs at first, flickering and unstable, but growing stronger with each attempt. She learned that her wolf, when she finally saw her in the reflection of a still pool, was not gray or brown or black. She was gold. Pure, blazing gold, with eyes like twin suns. Kalis assigned her a trainer, an ancient wolf named Morkant, who claimed to have studied Aurelian texts before the burning night. He was patient, methodical, and utterly unimpressed by her fumbling attempts at control. You are a bonfire trying to be a candle, Morkant said on the third morning, after Senya accidentally scorched a tapestry worth more than Thornwood Manor. Stop fighting your power. It is not your enemy. It burns, Senya gritted out, shaking her singed fingers. Of course it burns. You are the sun. Morkant's wrinkled face softened slightly. But the sun does not burn itself. It simply is. You must learn to simply be. That evening, Kalis found her on the tower balcony, staring out at the mountains. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of rose and amber. Her birthmark shimmered faintly in resonance with the fading light. Morkant says you're making progress. Kalis leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that she could feel the coolness that radiated from him, shadow to her sun. Morkant is being generous. Senya sighed. I set fire to 3 things today. One of them was my own sleeve. A sound escaped Kalis. Low, rough, unexpected. It took Senya a moment to realize he was laughing. I'm sorry, he said, composing himself. It's just the most powerful wolf on the continent, defeated by her own clothing. Senya found herself smiling despite everything. The sleeve had it coming. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Kalis spoke again, his voice serious. The council has been informed of your existence. Word is spreading. By tomorrow, every pack on the continent will know that an Aurelian lives. He turned to face her. You have a choice to make, Senya. What choice? You can stay here. Train. Learn to control your power. Stand beside me and help me break my bloodline's curse. His silver eyes searched hers. Or you can leave. I'll give you gold, a new identity, safe passage to the human territories. You can disappear, live a quiet life, and never use your power again. Senya thought of her cellar in Thornwood, the apple cores, the cracked hands, the years of being nothing. Then she thought of the wolf inside her, golden and fierce and awake. If I leave, she said slowly, the pure dawn will keep hunting me. Yes. And your curse will kill you. Kalis's jaw tightened. That is not your burden to carry. Maybe not. Senya turned to face him fully. But I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being the girl who scrubs floors and eats scraps and prays to be invisible. Her birthmark flared, golden light spilling across the balcony. I want to be more. I want to matter. She held out her hand, the hand with the mark. Teach me to be a queen, and I'll teach you what it means to stand in the sun. Kalis looked at her hand for a long moment. Then slowly, he took it. His shadow curled around her light, and neither consumed the other. Then we begin tomorrow, he said, and gods help anyone who tries to stop us. The attack came at dawn. Senya was in the training yard, practicing light manipulation, under Morkant's watchful eye, when the warning horns split the air. 3 long blasts, the signal for hostile approach. Kalis appeared within seconds, his expression carved from stone. The southern gate, a delegation from Thornwood. Senya's blood ran cold. Thornwood? Aldrich Vane, and he's brought company. Kalis's lip curled. Apparently, he's realized what he sold me and wants his property returned. They met the delegation in the Great Hall. Senya stood at Kalis's right hand, dressed not in servant's gray, but in a gown of white and gold that Kalis had commissioned for her. Her hair was braided back, her birthmark visible and glowing faintly. She looked like what she was, an Aurelian princess. The doors opened, and Aldrich Vane strode in like he owned the citadel. He was flanked by his beta and a dozen warriors and, to Senya's disgust, Helda and Revna. Her stepmother wore her finest dress, her face arranged in an expression of wounded maternal concern. Revna stood slightly behind, her amber eyes fixed on Senya with naked hatred. Alpha Thane, Aldrich's voice boomed through the hall. I demand the return of my pack member. The girl Senya Vorn was sold under false pretenses. She belongs to Thornwood. She belongs to no one. Kalis didn't raise his voice, but the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Least of all a pack that starved her, beat her, and sold her like livestock. She was a servant, Helda interjected, stepping forward with tears glistening in her eyes. A troubled girl. We tried to help her, but she was always difficult. When she showed signs of instability, we thought a change of environment might. Instability. Senya's voice cut through her stepmother's lies like a blade. Is that what you call sleeping in a flooded cellar? Eating apple cores for breakfast? Being told I was worthless every day of my life? Helda's mask flickered. Senya, darling, you're confused. The awakening has... Don't. Senya stepped forward, and her birthmark blazed. The light forced Helda back a step, her face going pale. You sold me for 30 pieces of silver. You didn't even ask where I was going or if I would survive. You were happy to be rid of me. Revna laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Can you blame us? You were pathetic. A wolfless runt taking up space. She looked Senya up and down, sneering at the fine gown. Playing dress-up doesn't change what you are. You're still the same garbage we scraped off our boots. The light around Senya intensified. Morkant had warned her about this. Emotion feeding power, power spiraling out of control. She forced herself to breathe. I'm not garbage, Senya said quietly. I never was. You just couldn't see my worth because you were too busy looking down? Aldrich stepped forward, his patience clearly wearing thin. Enough of this. The girl is Thornwood property. The sale was fraudulent. We didn't know what we were selling. I'm invoking the right of reclamation under pack law. Kalis moved so fast he blurred. One moment he was standing beside Senya. The next, he had Aldrich by the throat, lifting the larger man off his feet. You dare invoke pack law in my hall? Kalis's voice was barely human. Shadows writhed around him, tendrils of darkness coiling up his arms. You sold her. The transaction is complete. She is under my protection now, and if you or anyone from your pathetic territory comes within 100 miles of her again, I will personally ensure that Thornwood burns to ash. He released Aldrich, who stumbled backward, gasping. However, Kalis straightened his tunic, his composure returning like a mask sliding into place. I am not unreasonable. The law allows for disputes to be settled by combat. If you believe your claim is just, choose a champion. I will choose mine. Aldrich's eyes darted to Senya, calculating. Fine. I choose myself. He cracked his neck, muscles bunching beneath his shirt. An alpha against whoever you put forward. When I win, the girl comes home. Senya stepped forward before Kalis could speak. No champion, she said. I'll fight him myself. The hall erupted. Aldrich laughed. Helda gasped. Even Kalis turned to her with sharp concern. Senya, he's a trained alpha. You've had 3 days of learning what I am. Senya met his silver eyes. You said I had to choose. I'm choosing. I'm done letting other people fight my battles. I'm done being the victim. She looked at Aldrich, and her voice dropped to something cold and certain. I'm going to show him exactly what he sold for 30 pieces of silver. Aldrich's laughter died. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Tomorrow at dawn, Kayla said slowly, studying Senya with something that might have been pride. The combat circle. To the yield or to the death. To the death, Senya said. And she meant it. The combat circle was carved into the mountainside behind the citadel. A ring of standing stones older than memory, worn smooth by centuries of wind and blood. The ground within was packed earth, dark with the ghosts of ancient battles. Senya stood on the northern edge, barefoot despite the cold. She wore simple fighting clothes, a sleeveless tunic and fitted trousers that allowed for movement. Her birthmark was uncovered, pulsing with steady golden light. On the southern edge, Aldrich veins stretched and flexed, playing to the crowd that had gathered on the slopes above. He was massive in human form, and his wolf, she had heard, was even larger. A brute who had won his position through violence and intimidation. He's bigger than you, her wolf murmured inside her mind. Stronger, more experienced. I know, Senya thought back. Good. Then we don't underestimate him. We just destroy him. Kayla stood at the edge of the circle, his face unreadable. Beside him, Morkant watched with ancient eyes. The old trainer had given her one piece of advice that morning. Do not fight his fight. Make him fight yours. Helda and Revna watched from a raised platform, their expressions hungry. They expected Senya to fail. They expected to drag her back to Thornwood in chains. They were wrong. Begin, the arbiter announced. Aldrich didn't shift immediately. He wanted to humiliate her first, beat her in human form before delivering the killing blow as a wolf. He charged, fist cocked back for a devastating strike. Senya didn't block. She didn't dodge. She stepped into the attack, ducking under his arm and pressing her palm flat against his chest. Light erupted from her hand. Aldrich flew backward, trailing smoke, and crashed into one of the standing stones hard enough to crack it. He lay there for a moment, stunned, then lurched to his feet with a roar of rage. Lucky shot, runt! He shifted mid-charge. His body exploded outward, bones snapping and reforming, until a massive gray wolf stood in his place, easily 7 feet at the shoulder, with yellow eyes blazing with killing intent. Senya smiled. Our turn. She let the transformation take her. Unlike the violent awakening in the tower, this shift was controlled. Painful still, but focused. Her bones sang as they rearranged. Golden fur burst from her skin like sunrise breaking through clouds. When she stood on 4 paws, she was radiant. Her wolf was smaller than Aldrich's. But she glowed. Literally glowed, light emanating from her fur in waves that made the spectators shield their eyes. And her aura. The sheer pressure of it forced the weaker wolves in the crowd to their knees. Aldrich hesitated. For the first time, real fear flickered in his yellow eyes. He should be afraid, her wolf growled. He should be terrified. They clashed in the center of the ring. Aldrich was strong, brutally so. His jaws snapped at her throat, his claws raked at her flanks. He fought dirty, using his weight to try to pin her, going for crippling blows rather than clean kills. But Senya was faster, and every time they touched, she burned him. Light poured from her fur wherever they connected. Aldrich's muzzle blistered. His paws smoked. He yelped and scrambled back, shaking his head, disoriented by the pain. Now, her wolf commanded. Senya lunged. She didn't go for his throat. Too predictable. Instead, she went low, sinking her teeth into his front leg and wrenching. The snap of bone echoed across the mountainside. Aldrich howled and collapsed. He tried to rise, but his leg buckled beneath him. He snapped at her desperately, but Senya was already circling, already positioning herself. She placed one massive paw on his neck, pinning him to the earth. Submit, she projected, the command rippling outward with psychic force. Never, Aldrich snarled, shifting back to human form. His face was a mask of blood and defiance. I'll never submit to a runt, to your better? Senya shifted back as well, keeping her foot on his throat. She was naked and bloody and didn't care. Her skin still glowed with residual light. You should have treated me better, Aldrich. You should have seen what I was instead of what you assumed. She pressed down and he choked. Yield. I yield. The words came out strangled, broken. I yield. Senya stepped back. She looked up at the platform where Helda and Revna sat frozen, their faces portraits of disbelief. Your alpha yields, Senya called out, her voice carrying across the mountainside. Thornwood's claim is forfeit. If any of you ever come for me again, I won't show mercy a second time. Kalis appeared beside her, draping a cloak over her shoulders. His silver eyes were bright with something fierce. Pride, yes, but also something deeper. Something that made her heart race. Well fought, he murmured. I had a good teacher. She looked at Morcant, who inclined his head. But then Senya swayed. The adrenaline was crashing and something else was rising in its place. A heat that started in her core and spread outward like wildfire. Her skin flushed. Her birthmark blazed so bright it was almost blinding. What? She gasped. What's happening? Morcant's ancient eyes went wide. The combat, the shift. It's triggered her cycle. He looked at Kalis with alarm. She's going into heat. The effect was immediate. Every unmated male in the vicinity stiffened, nostrils flaring. Aldrich, broken on the ground, actually whimpered and tried to crawl toward her before his own warriors restrained him. And the scent. Gods. The scent was overwhelming. Honey and sunlight and want. Kalis growled, low and possessive. His eyes bled to pure black, shadow rising around him like a living thing. Get her inside, he snarled at Morcant. Now, before I... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. No. Senya grabbed his arm, her fingers burning against his shadow-cooled skin. The contact sent electricity through them both. I don't want to hide. I don't want to suppress this. An explosion rocked the citadel. The standing stones trembled. Screams erupted from the crowd. A massive plume of smoke rose from the eastern wall. My king! A guard sprinted toward them, bloody and panicked. Attack! The eastern gate has fallen! Who? Kalis demanded, his personal crisis instantly shelved for duty. The guard's face was gray with terror. The pure dawn, they've found her. And they've brought an army. The eastern wall was gone, not damaged, not breached. Gone. Reduced to rubble by some force that had punched through reinforced stone like it was paper. Through the gap poured soldiers in white and gold armor, their faces hidden behind masks shaped like the sun. The pure dawn. Hunters of Aurelians. The same fanatics who had murdered her mother 13 years ago. Senya ran toward the chaos. Kalis at her side, the heat in her blood temporarily forgotten in the face of existential threat. Smoke choked the air. The clash of steel and the screams of the dying created a symphony of horror. There, a pure dawn captain spotted her, pointing with a blade that crackled with strange energy. The abomination! Kill her! A dozen soldiers broke formation and charged. Kalis intercepted them like a shadow given form. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. His darkness flowed around him, solidifying into blades of pure night that cut through armor like water. Men fell screaming, clutching at wounds that seemed to consume light itself. But more kept coming. The pure dawn had committed everything to this assault: hundreds of soldiers, battle-trained wolves, and something worse. A figure strode through the breach in the wall. He was old, impossibly old, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and scars, his eyes burning with fanatical hatred. He wore robes of white emblazoned with a black sun, the symbol of the pure dawn. And he carried a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with sickly violet light. Varrick's heir, Morkant breathed, having caught up to them. His ancient face had gone pale. Blessed stars. It's Mordecai. He was supposed to be dead. Who? Senya demanded. The last living disciple of Varrick the Destroyer. He led the extermination of your bloodline. He's 200 years old, kept alive by forbidden magic. Morkant gripped her arm. He's the one who killed your ancestor's child, and he will not stop until you're dead. Mordecai raised his staff. The violet crystal flared, and a wave of energy swept across the battlefield. Every wolf it touched, Kaelus's soldiers, pure dawn fanatics alike, collapsed, howling in agony. It was designed to incapacitate, not kill. He wanted Senya alone. There you are. Mordecai's voice carried across the chaos, amplified by magic. The last weed in the garden. I burned your grandmother. I gutted your grandfather. I drowned your mother's screams in her own blood. He smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. And now I'll finish what I started. He thrust his staff forward, and a beam of violet light lanced toward Senya. She raised her hands instinctively. And the light stopped. A barrier of gold had materialized before her, pulsing with her heartbeat. The violet beam splashed against it like water on stone, dissipating harmlessly. Mordecai's smile faltered. Impossible. You're untrained. You shouldn't be able to— I'm an Aurelian. Senya stepped forward, the heat in her blood transmuting into something else. Pure, righteous fury. We don't follow your rules. She dropped the barrier and thrust both hands forward. Twin columns of golden fire erupted from her palms, screaming across the battlefield toward Mordecai. The old fanatic raised his staff, creating a shield of his own, but the force of her attack drove him backward, his feet carving furrows in the stone. You killed my mother! Senya screamed, pouring more power into the attack. Her birthmark was blazing like a second sun, light radiating from every inch of her skin. You hunted my people like animals. You thought you could exterminate us? She pulled her hands back and slammed them together. The two columns of fire merged into a single devastating beam. It shattered Mordecai's shield, vaporized his staff, and struck him full in the chest. The old man flew backward, crashing through the rubble of the eastern wall. He lay still, smoke rising from his robes. For a moment, silence fell over the battlefield. Then Mordecai laughed. He rose slowly, his robes burned away to reveal a body covered in glowing sigils, protective wards carved into his very flesh. The beam had hurt him, clearly, but he wasn't dead. Magnificent, he rasped, blood trickling from his mouth. You have power, child. But power without control is just a tantrum. He raised his hand, and dark energy gathered around his fingers. Let me show you what true mastery looks like. He released the energy, not at Senya, but at the citadel behind her. At the civilians huddled in the lower courtyard, at the wounded being tended by healers, at the hundreds of innocents who would die if that attack landed. Senya didn't think. She moved. She threw herself into the path of the attack, arms spread wide, and did something she didn't know she could do. She absorbed it. The dark energy hit her like a tidal wave. It burned. Gods. It burned worse than anything she had ever felt. Shadow and malice, and 2 centuries of hatred pouring into her body. Her birthmark screamed in protest, the golden light flickering, dimming. But she held. She took all of it, every drop of that poisonous power, and she transformed it. Inside her, sun met shadow. Light embraced darkness, and instead of destroying each other, they merged. Senya opened her eyes. They were no longer gold. They were swirling with both. Amber and silver, light and shadow, perfectly balanced. What? Mordecai's voice cracked with disbelief. What are you? Senya raised her hand. Light and shadow spiraled around her fingers, intertwined like lovers. I'm the end of your crusade. She released the power. It wasn't a beam or a blast. It was a judgment. A wave of combined energy that washed over Mordecai and the remaining Pure Dawn soldiers. The fanatics screamed as their own hatred was reflected back at them, amplified 1,000-fold. They crumbled to dust, their bodies unable to contain the contradiction of light and darkness. Mordecai lasted longest. He fell to his knees, clawing at his chest as the sigils on his skin burned away one by one. The prophecy, he whispered, staring at Senya with something approaching awe. The sun and shadow made one. The end of all wars. It was true. He collapsed. This time, he didn't rise. Senya stood alone in the rubble, the combined power still crackling around her. She was exhausted. She was burning. Arms caught her before she fell. Kalis. His face was bloody, his shadows tattered, but he was alive. He held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I've got you, he murmured. I've got you, Senya. Is it over? She whispered. He looked at the battlefield, the dead Pure Dawn soldiers, the unconscious but living defenders, the crumbling wall. The battle is over. They're gone. His silver eyes met hers and something electric passed between them. But you and I have unfinished business. The heat roared back, stronger than before, no longer suppressible. Senya pulled him closer. Then let's finish it. Kalis carried her to his private chambers. The citadel was chaos, wounded being tended, walls being secured, victory being processed. But none of it mattered. The heat consumed everything, reducing the world to sensation and need. He kicked the door closed behind them and set her down gently on the massive bed. For a moment, he just looked at her. This woman who had been a servant a week ago, who had destroyed an ancient evil an hour ago, and who was now looking at him with eyes that held both sun and shadow. Are you sure? His voice was rough, strained. The effort of holding back was visibly costing him. The heat can cloud judgment. I won't take advantage. Kalis. Senya reached up and cupped his face in her hands. I chose you. Not because of the heat. Not because of prophecies or bloodlines or curses. I chose you. The man who saw my worth when I was covered in ash. The king who knelt before a servant girl. She pulled him down toward her. Now stop being noble and kiss me. He did. The kiss was like their powers. Shadow and light colliding, consuming, completing. Senya felt the bond snap into place, a golden chain linking her soul to his. She felt his curse recoil from her light, felt her own fire tempered by his darkness. They were different. They were opposites. They were perfect. The night became a blur of heat and whispers and pleasure that bordered on pain. Each touch strengthened the bond. Each gasp wove their souls tighter together. When dawn finally broke, spilling pink light through the shattered windows, they lay tangled in silk sheets, breathing hard, transformed. Senya looked at her wrist. The birthmark had changed. It was no longer just a golden sun. Now tendrils of shadow curled through it, creating something new, something beautiful. The curse, she whispered, pressing her hand to Kalis's chest. I can feel it. It's fading. Kalis's voice was filled with wonder. He lifted his hand, and instead of pure shadow, his power now carried flickers of golden light. You didn't just balance me, Senya. You healed me. Tears burned in her eyes. Good. You deserve to live, Kalis Thane. You deserve a future. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. Our future, he corrected. Together. 1 month later, the continent gathered at Ironspire Citadel. The eastern wall had been rebuilt, stronger than before, infused with both light and shadow magic. The pure dawn was shattered, its surviving members fleeing to the edges of the world. And today, the wolves came not for war, but for celebration. Senya stood on the great balcony, overlooking a sea of people. She wore a gown of white and black, perfectly balanced, a crown of woven silver and gold upon her head. Her birthmark, the mark of sun and shadow, was displayed proudly, no longer a secret to be hidden. Beside her stood Kalis, looking healthier than he had in years. The shadows under his eyes were gone, his curse was broken, and when he looked at his queen, his smile held a warmth that had been absent for a decade. "Lords and ladies of the realm," Kalis's voice boomed across the courtyard. "I present to you Queen Senya Thane, last of the Aurelians, breaker of curses, destroyer of the pure dawn, and my bonded mate." The crowd erupted into cheers. But Senya wasn't looking at the dignitaries or the soldiers or the common folk celebrating below. She was looking at a small group standing near the back of the platform. Helda, Revna, Aldrich Vane. They had been brought here in chains, not for execution, but for something far more satisfying. "Approach," Senya commanded. They stumbled forward, forced by guards, their fine clothes replaced with the rough gray of prisoners. Helda's face was gaunt with fear. Revna's beauty had faded, stress and sleepless nights taking their toll. Aldrich's broken leg had healed badly, leaving him with a permanent limp. "Do you remember what you told me?" Senya asked, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent courtyard. "You called me a rat, a genetic dead end, garbage to be scraped off boots." Revna opened her mouth. To beg, perhaps, or to spit defiance. But Senya held up a hand. "I could kill you. I could have you imprisoned for life. I could do to you everything you did to me and worse." She paused. "But I won't." Shock rippled through the crowd. Even Kalis raised an eyebrow. "Instead, you will serve," Senya continued. "You will scrub floors and empty chamber pots and sleep in cellars. You will eat what you are given and speak only when spoken to. And every day, you will remember what you threw away for 30 pieces of silver." She gestured, and servants came forward. Servants who had once been Senya's peers in Thornwood, now loyal to their risen queen. "Take them to their new quarters. The cellars should be comfortable. I hear they only flood in spring." As they were dragged away, Revna twisted to look back, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she screamed. "I'm sorry, Senya. Please." Senya watched her go without expression. Apologies are cheap. Service is earned. She turned back to the crowd, reaching down to take Kalis's hand. He squeezed her fingers, shadow curling around sunlight. "The old world is ending," Senya announced. "A new age is beginning. One where worth is not determined by birth or power or politics, but by the content of one's heart. I was a servant. I was worthless in their eyes. And now I stand before you as queen." She raised their joined hands. "If I can rise, so can any of you. Remember that." The cheers that followed shook the mountains. Later, as the sun set over Ironspire, Senya stood alone on the balcony where she had first made her choice. The kingdom spread out before her, no longer a prison, but a home. Kalis joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Any regrets?" he murmured. She thought of the cellar, the apple cores, the bruises and the hunger and the endless, grinding hopelessness. Then she thought of the light, the power, the mate whose heartbeat now matched hers. "Not one," she said. And the sun set on the servant girl who became a queen. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If you loved this story and want more paranormal romance, revenge fantasies, and epic transformations, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.